This is Dolynny TV, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Welcome back to another edition of Edmonton Oilers discussion here on the channel today. My great pleasure to have you along as the Edmonton Oilers have gone out and made that first training camp move, signing Brandon Sutter to a PTO. And of course, a weird announcement today as well coming from Bob Stauffer, who was then retweeted by the Edmonton Oilers Twitter account. So a weird way to get some news. Obviously, Bob Stauffer, the most connected man in Edmonton Oilers hockey land. And of course, he comes through with a big chunk of news on a do-nothing Tuesday. We expected to hear about Evan Bouchard today. That still has not come to fruition, just shortly after 7:30. So we'll see if that is something we're talking about later on this evening. However, I doubt it. It will likely be tomorrow or Thursday. So without further ado, friends, I've talked enough without at least asking you to do a favor for me. If you are new to the channel, I want you to consider hitting that subscribe button. I just don't want you to miss anything this upcoming season. I promise it's going to be good. And as well, if you are a returning or new subscriber, if you could click that bell and enable all notifications. If you're looking for your daily, semi-daily dose of Oilers ASAP, that's the best way to get it. All right, number one, what do we need to know? Brandon Sutter is coming to camp on a PTO. Now you're looking at stats that you would say, well, those aren't the worst stats I've seen. Those stats are 2 years old, my friends. That's the problem here with Brandon Sutter. He's been out trying to recover for a long while. Obviously, right, it's a 2-year gap at this point. So what he's got to bring to the team, who knows at this point. But 9 goals, 3 assists, 43 games played back in 2020, 2021. And you also got to remember, friends, back in the day, I want to say it was the year before that, the Oilers were actually interested in bringing Brandon Sutter aboard for that 2019-2020 playoff drive. So let me bring up this graphic now so as you see what's going on there, because those stats really are kind of meaningless to the whole story here. I'll get to that in a moment, but we got to get through the kind of core of who we're talking about. He's a center, right-hand shot, 6'3", 390 pounds. That was, of course, according to Sportsnet's last update on their page. What he comes into camp at, we'll officially wait to see. But he's 34 years old or 33. I don't know if Sportsnet's quite got his birth year right. I've seen 34. I've seen 33. Not 100% sure. And of course, he is born in Huntington, New York, way back in the day when the Sutters ran a certain New York team, I do believe, if you actually track the birth years. All right. Anyway, 13 years pro, a former top 12 draft pick in the NHL 2020 or 2007 NHL entry draft, round 1, of course. And that's where we kind of lead off, right? That's Brandon Sutter, what you need to know. Obviously, you see him in a Canucks uniform there. He spent the last several years with the Vancouver Canucks before taking the 2-year absence to try and get healthy again. It appears he's ready to make a comeback, and this is one of those PTOs, friends, where I think we look at it and say it's a do-nothing PTO. It'll be a chance for a guy to show something to maybe a team overseas, maybe another AHL team somewhere else, and potentially another NHL team that might be looking for a guy to round out the roster. As my voice fails me right there, didn't expect that to happen on a Tuesday afternoon. Normally that's a Sunday morning thing, but we're going through it, right? It's just started raining here in southern Alberta finally after a few weeks of hotness, so it's a good thing. But yeah, Brandon Sutter, what else do we know? Maybe I could queue up another graphic. Yeah, we could probably do that right here, right now, and get to going about his stats and why the Oilers may be interested in signing him here. You go back to 2008-2009 when he broke into the NHL with 50 games. He's a veteran of 770 NHL games. 77-70 if you've been listening to the Spence Diamond commercials lately on good old Albertan radio. Either way, right? You look at it here. He breaks in 08-09, right? Plays a few seasons with Carolina, then goes over to Pittsburgh, and then signs that sweetheart deal with the Vancouver Canucks. It was an absolute amazing deal for him. 5 years at $4.375 million? You tell me where in any of that he had earned that. I think that was kind of a focal point for a lot of Canucks fans over the time there for him. And obviously the last few years really not doing much of anything for the Canucks, but that 1 year where he had 17 points in 44 games played, that was where I believe the Oilers were interested in adding a right-hand shot, veteran center to the team to gear up for the playoffs that then got put on hiatus and didn't happen until about this time back in 2020. And oh, by the way, yours truly lost his marbles for about a solid next 6-7 months. That was not a good time, but hey, we're better for it. Brandon Sutter apparently better for it as well, back ready to make a comeback. Now, when we're talking about why he would be doing this with the Edmonton Oilers and why the Oilers would be allowing this chance for him to happen, well, look at it this way. I've talked about in previous videos, I am not comfortable with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl playing more than 2 preseason games. That's just, I just don't want to run that risk, right? The Oilers are playing an extended 8-game schedule. I know a lot of teams play the 6, 7, 8-game schedule, but when you're playing 8 games, you should be letting your rookies compete for every single chance they can get. Secondarily, the Oilers have a ton of young guys coming up through the system over the next few years, so you got to evaluate where they're at and where they're headed into the juniors and, of course, AHL seasons. And in that, you got to fill out a roster. And obviously, the Oilers, I think during camp, will run 12-6 because it'll be a lot easier to run 12-6 because you only have so many defensemen to kind of figure out who's doing what, where's everyone playing, and what's happening there. So 12-6, you got to round out 12 forwards. The Oilers normally run 11-7. That's where I'm going with this, is they got to have an extra 2-3 forwards available a night to actually round out that 12-man set up front. So you think about that, Brandon Sutter comes in, no risk, no reward, right? Literally, that's the way I'd view it. Is I am not upset that Brandon Sutter is here, but I also don't view it that Brandon Sutter is going to move the needle for the Oilers at camp, to be quite honest with you. Think about it in the same sense that Jason Demers did, except for we'll explain why I don't believe Brandon Sutter has as much rope to run with as Jason Demers did in the Oilers organization, because there's some complications down in Bakersfield. But when you look at it here for the Oilers at current, is it just makes sense to have a veteran guy around who can play some games, might be able to go out there and get something out of it, right, for him personally, but also help the organization fill out the roster for a few more games in a training camp. There's nothing saying Brandon Sutter doesn't play one game for the Oilers' first game of training camp and goodbye, right? That's as simple as it could be for the Edmonton Oilers here at training camp when it comes to Brandon Sutter. And now what you also have to look at here, there is one thing I want to get to on Sutter and why I'm mentioning the Oilers were interested in bringing him around for that 2019-2020 run, is he is a playoff guy, right? A guy who produces points. In 2 sets of playoff runs, he was a guy that was almost more than half a point, and a guy who was also a third of a point per game. If you're getting that on the 4th line, no matter who it is on the PTOs that comes out of camp and joins the Oilers full time, you will gladly take that kind of caliber of offense. Now, that's many years removed from now, and obviously, who knows how accurate anything with Brandon Sutter's scouting reports from years previous is going to be after 2 years off, trying to get back into shape, and of course, coming into camp on a PTO. But will remain to be seen on that. Then what I do have to mention, though, is I talked about complications in Bakersfield a few moments ago, and I'll cue this up for you. This is where it gets complicated here for anybody trying to make the Oilers on a PTO and sign a 2-way or AHL deal with Condors, kind of similar to what Jason Demers did out of camp last year, is the Condors are loaded. Not necessarily in terms of like they're the best AHL team that'll ever exist. No, I'm talking about loaded in terms of roster bodies. It's kind of tough. If you remember last year, Devon Shore went down to the minors, and they had to actually sit veterans game in, game out while Devon Shore was down there to have Devon Shore in the lineup. So what would end up happening if you had a Brandon Sutter type player or anyone there, you would end up doing the same thing again this year. And in fact, they may still be at risk of doing that this year if certain combinations of players are down on the farm. That's kind of what I've chatted up with Bakersfield Insider this summer, is it's really tough when we talk about adding a veteran type player, whatever. I don't actually have the definition of what the AHL considers a veteran, but there is a veteran limit on rosters. So you have to kind of set your roster a certain way every night to be able to play in the AHL. That's a complication. You want to get complicated, go figure that out and report back. But you got Berglund down there, Borgo, Kajula, Chiasson, De Jong, you've got Griffith, you've got Gruby, of course, who we totally have not talked about since we acquired him, but we did that. You've got James Hamblin. You've got Dylan Holloway, who's currently listed in Bakersfield. Might bounce back and forth, but likely to be full-time NHL, so let's not worry about that. Dino Cambiet's down there. You've got Raphael Lavoie, Brad Malone, Greg McKaig, Matvey Petrov, Carter Savoy, Tyler Tullio, and Cameron Wright. That's a lot of bodies. You're talking about 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 17 at minimum, 16, 15 if Dylan Holloway and Raphael Lavoie are up at the NHL level. Of course, Lane Peterson as well, a guy who could potentially be down there, but not listed on this list. Now on defense, even still, the same problem is going to exist on defense, and this is where I just want to bring this up. You've got Xavier Bernard, you've got Connor Kurokin, you've got Cam Dineen, Ben Gleason, Noel Hoffenmeyer, Jake Johnson, Phil Kemp, Marcus Niemelainen, you've got Alex Peters, and Max Warner. You figure there's quite a few players on that roster of the defense who you're going to want in there every single night. Obviously, Hoffenmeyer, Dineen, Niemelainen if he's not playing in the NHL, probably Max Warner as well. You've signed Gleason, so you probably want him there. So in terms of players doing the I came to camp and then I signed an NHL deal hoping to make the NHL again later in the season, just like Justin Bailey did last year, I think, with the Oilers. Or did he sign an actual NHL deal? That's a good question. We could double check that. But you kind of look at a couple of these guys here. It's kind of similar to that for the Oilers. It's very, very unlikely that Brandon Sutter would be able to convert a PTO into an AHL deal with the Oilers. So when we break it all down, Brandon Sutter is simply here to fill a roster spot early in camp, show up, show out, and hopefully find a contract somewhere in the ether of the hockey universe at the start of September, October-ish. So, friends, I'm Tyson. This is Dolynny TV. Thank you so much for being aboard for this. I really love this graphics thing, you know. Me and Patrick chatted about it a little bit, and, you know, the extra 5 minutes it takes to make some of these graphics, not too bad of an ad. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments on that. I think it makes my videos a little bit more watchable. I know I actually enjoyed watching the last video I did in this style. So thank you so much for being aboard today. I'm going to head on out. I got a busy Tuesday night to get to. And you enjoy yours. I am up on, gone.